Welcome to the Strictly Business Podcast.
I have Amanda King with me. Amanda, thank you so much for joining me.
Of course.
When James Norquay says I have to chat with XYZ, I just chat with that person and pretty much don't ask any other questions about it. James says jump, I say how high. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's lovely chatting in this. It's very warm Sydney week.
Yes, it's very warm. And how are you coping with the weather?
By finding air conditioning. So that's how I'm coping.
Yeah, that seems to be the best way of doing it. Well, Amanda, I've never actually had the privilege of chatting with you. And just to give you a bit of a heads up, I'm the worst podcast host ever. Most unprepared, most unprofessional, can get a little bit awkward at times. So please bear with me. And when I need someone to bail me out, please feel free to do so.
Not a problem. We're all friends here.
Exactly. I mean, I send you the questions that I had in mind 10 minutes before. That's just how awesome and prepared I am.
Well, shall we get into it?
Yeah. So tell me, how long have you been in SEO? A little bit about yourself, a little bit, whatever you want to share, why you got into SEO, how you got into SEO, how long you've been doing SEO.
Yeah. So I got into SEO in 2010. So I've been doing it for over a decade now. And I feel like many folks in the industry, I just kind of fell into it. My background is business and English lit, odd combination, very liberal arts uni degree in the States. And I got hired by a digital marketing agency as a copywriter. And this was at the point in time where SEO was all about exact match anchor text. So they were like, well, it would take us a very long time to teach someone how to properly write. But if we already have someone that can properly write, it would be easy for us to teach someone SEO. So that's how I got into it. And it just kind of snowballed from there in terms of getting into analytics and user experience and conversion rate optimization. And and then, I was in the States for about 3 years and then came over to Australia and have been in Australia since 2013. So the vast majority of my career has been in Australia. But I grew up in the States, so I have kind of that dual perspective of market understanding. But yeah, it's like pretty much everyone, I just kind of fell into it, and I've stayed in it because I enjoy solving puzzles. And at the end of the day, that's kind of what SEO is, right? It's solving puzzles.
Absolutely. And how have you found the Australian sort of climate in terms of, I mean, you said you spend the majority of time here. How do you find the SEO community differences, or what are some of the major comparisons between, because I've got my perspective on America coming from an Aussie from far away. What would you say, like some of the big differences between the Australian and US communities in SEO?
Yeah, so beyond kind of the communities, I remember when I came over to Australia, clients were only just starting to tackle the things that I was dealing with when I started in SEO. So SEO was probably a couple of years behind in terms of
in Australia.
Yeah, implementation and kind of like getting on board with things and understanding that SEO is about the user. So the maturity of the market is a little bit lower. In terms of the community, I was very lucky in that I was working at an agency as I was leaving Australia that was quite well known. So we went to a lot of the conferences that were in like New York and along the East Coast. So, but I do think that there are similarities to a certain extent, that Australia's and the US are both quite big places. So people are quite distributed in terms of the SEO community. And it's similar, I feel, in the sense that like people talk about like meeting up and doing things and having like community things, but at the end of the day, who's going to organize it? It's always quite difficult. So I actually think they're pretty similar in the sense that, you know, it's a big place, but I will say there are much fewer like events and conferences in Australia than there are in the States.
Yeah, cool. So we know what you'll be doing in the next 2 to 3 years in SEO. Planning all the events that we're all too lazy. I'll just can't be bothered doing.
No. Too much time.
Yeah, I get you. So have you sort of since 2010? I mean, I only started 2007, so it wasn't that long behind you. I didn't feel like I got taught necessarily all the right things. What, especially from early on, from your perspective, starting in SEO, or for people that are looking to get started in SEO, what was your experiences at first because I hated SEO. I thought I started as a web developer. The company that I was applying for was a web design agency. I got the job that said, guess what? You're doing SEO. And in 2007, I did a bit of SEO with the keywords. As I was building the website, my boss was telling me those meant a keyword tag. You need to add them on every tag and dump keywords in there. That was pretty much the extent of SEO 2007 for me. And then when I said, no, that just seems like a total waste of time. And then 2008, I left that company to apply for another job in web design full time. Got the job. They told me, guess what? We're not building any websites anymore. We're doing SEO full time. I was living by myself. I was 24 years old. I sort of had to I'm talking about 20 years old, 21 years old. So I'm like, I'm learning how to wash my own clothes and discovering SEO, and went, well, I have to do it, and I hated it. So for me at first, it was a lot of spamming, keyword stuffing. Wasn't what it is now. What was your first impressions and experiences with it?
Oh, so my first impressions, the marketing agency that I was at, that first role, I was only there for about 5 months. It was actually quite a chaotic place. And I remember I ended up, one of the clients that I was working on was an exterminator, like a pest control kind of exterminator. And I remember there was one point where I was getting so stressed about what to do for this client, and like different people telling me to do different things, and like getting completely different information for things and how best to do them, that I was literally having dreams about all of the different types of like bugs that they were like, you need to write like a paragraph about carpenter bees, or like all of these different things. So like my
and you're waking
initial...
up thinking about cockroaches. Cockroaches.
So a bit traumatizing. So my initial introduction wasn't that great into SEO, probably similar to yours, but with kind of my writing and my business background, I eventually kind of leaned into it. And as things started to get more about kind of the customer and aligning with the business and the user experience throughout the years, it's become a lot more natural. And if you're looking to get into SEO now, that's where I would start. I wouldn't necessarily start with like traditional SEO. I'd start with making sure that you have a kind of broader understanding of the kind of scope of how people interact with the web and what their expectations are. Because it is a much more mature market in terms of people, browsing the web. So.
Yeah, I mean, traditional SEO with titles and descriptions was all about keywords stuffing in 2007, 2008, whereas now you're writing for click-through rate, and you need to understand the market and what is valuable for them. So I think you're exactly right. Are you mainly? Do you find that SEO is starting to break up into specialists within the niche, I mean, do you feel like an SEO can be the link builder, like the guy that scopes or the girl that contacts, maps out the content scope,
Yeah.
does the link building, does the PR, does the technical, does the keyword research? Like, I tell my clients I could spend the whole time keyword research, content mapping.
Yeah.
10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100, whatever you want. It just keeps going. It's like a maze.
Yeah.
That wasn't like what it was when I started.
No. And look, I think there will always be fundamentally a difference between people that focus on site and off-site. Like, to be entirely frank, I haven't touched link building since 2013, and I have no intention of going back, because I would probably be crap. I would be crap at it. Like, I don't have the patience or the endurance to write those like hundreds of thousands of emails and like have communication with people in that way. For me, that's always kind of the fundamental break, right? It's always you're either on site or you're off site. Most of the time you have one specialty that you lean towards. And then I think if you're on site, like, whether or not you execute yourself on all of the things, I think it's important to have an understanding of all of the different kind of aspects. But you're right. It's at a certain point you have to put a cap on, okay, I'm only going to spend 20 hours on this keyword research, or but that's where having a strategy comes in, right? Because you understand, okay, that in this market, it's a your money, your life. Like, the content needs to be really on point. Like, I need to have a really nuanced, really clean, really clear content strategy. And their technical is fine. Like, they have some issues, but nothing that is gonna entirely drop their site out of search results. So it's really a game of prioritization and understanding what will make the impact.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I did a video on LinkedIn probably about 2 months ago where you don't approach every campaign in the same way. And even though, like, if you see, even like it's finer details, if you get an old site with a lot of links that doesn't have any content, well, then you know really what you need to be focusing on. If you've got a startup that's got no authority, practically just out of the sandbox or technically still in the sandbox, I think IA and site structure becomes extremely important. If the site's a super large e-commerce, which seems to be the vast majority of my entire career, the technical issues with pagination alone can make you do Homer Simpson twirls on the carpet floor, right? Because crawling Shopify becomes an enormous task. Finding problems becomes so intense. Link build, like some of these super large 160, 200K sites that I've dealt with that has Joomla, I can't believe it, Joomla, and this sort of custom-made shopping cart feature. Link building is not even on top of my mind. No. It's this site's been around since 2001. No one's ever really done a whole lot in terms of the design of, and they're just every kind of 3 or 4 years just trying to tap onto Joomla, have this customized shopping cart thing down the side here, have 50, 60 different subdomains all pointing in different, like that's really difficult, and you're not thinking about so every campaign, as you said, it comes down to strategy, but they're all different, and from the authority that they have to how long they've been around, how many pages they have, I think that's the maturity, and I think having to set the right expectations, because like I'm sure you could audit my technical SEO clients and be like, well, the comments will be like, hey, you haven't done any in-depth link building. Yeah, but we grew the impressions from 100K to 400K because we prioritized the technical. So I think prioritization, setting expectations, I think is where a lot of I reckon starting as a junior SEO now is a lot more difficult than it was in 2007 when I started.
Yeah, because there are a lot more factors, and Google as an algorithm has gotten more mature, and the audience has gotten more mature. So the baseline level of knowledge in terms of understanding all of those different elements is a lot higher. Whereas if you've been in the industry, you've like grown up with it. So a lot of it becomes kind of implicit muscle memory. Which is always interesting to have to try and remember, where you're like, I have this context of, a decade plus in the industry, but then what is it? If you can't explain something in a sentence, you don't actually really know it. So it's knowing how to like distill something down and be like, it's because of this.
Yeah. And I think the SEO community, and now the whole idea of content marketing through influencers on social media, the Gary Vaynerchuk, like all these people that have like pushed the importance of content. But I remember like going back as far as like forums and 4chan and like the SEO community, like I remember debating with my fellow colleagues in 2008 on content versus link building. It was like everything was versus everything. And there was always like a little faction of content marketer, preachers, evangelists. Then there was like the link builders. Like, no, it's all about link building. So I remember that was a lot of the discussion back in the day. And everyone sort of formulated their little factions. I mean, do you find now that, like, I've got clients in jewelry and e-commerce, and a lot of the e-commerce is super competitive. And what I also setting expectations, if I talk about some of the successful campaigns I had in 8, 9, 10, 11, as you said, the SEO community or the SEO awareness was much more mature. Now, like, especially with jewelry, that seems to be a big part of my career as well. Everyone does SEO now. When Michael Hill and Prouds were investing dollars into that TV advertising, pulling that back, pulling it into digital, specifically SEO, when we think digital, it's still largely SEO. So, like, I got to be on Google, right? I think between the algorithms generally becoming more advanced, Google still's got problems. And some experiments I'm doing with ChatGPT is pretty interesting. What they say and what they do don't necessarily always line up. But where was I going with that? The competitors that are investing in SEO, as you said, expectations on the level of entry. Like my clients, like, we want to rank first for this keyword. I'm like, have a look at what's first, and let's discuss what we need to do in order to look each other in the eye and say what we have deserves to be first.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting in those conversations as well is some of the machine learning that Google has done, where you've definitely seen it, and the way that their entity recognition informs their search results as well, because to some extent I've seen, at least with some of my clients, it landing much more favorably to brands that are already established and that have an offline presence. So there may be some clients now where you have that conversation where if they're like, oh, okay, I want to rank, not just on the first page, but in the first position, beyond the conversation about personalization and the fact that no one's search result is exactly the same. But that's aside from that, the concept that, okay, if you want to rank in the first result playing with these big brands, you need to do big brand things. You need to do offline advertising. Like, there's part of that conversation as well, which is interesting. That's coming back.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it sounds weird that digital people are talking about offline strategies, but it definitely plays a part. I mean, you can see when my clients saying, hey, look at these competitors and look how much traffic that they're getting. But if you actually break up the split between branded and unbranded search, you actually find we're not doing too badly. But they're everywhere. They're franchised. They're in like every major suburb along the east coast of Australia, like versus this little store in Gold Coast.
Yeah.
Who is actually taking market share on Google. But if they get their big brand mind together and start focusing on SEO and really paying attention, that could be challenging for us. So offline factors play a huge part in.
Absolutely.
Yeah, cool. So, I mean, even content UX, what is your view on, obviously you mentioned machine learning. I talk about rank brain a lot. And even if you don't rank first, just by clicks and bounce rates. So I explain all that with clients. What are your views on some of the research and depth in terms of content user experience? I mean, I tell my clients, that's a real thing now. Just creating an article, letting it go is not enough. They got the offsite SEO, the outreach, the stuff that you don't really want to do a whole lot on, and then like the content promotion side is a huge factor in it. Especially when the big brands are doing big brand things, and then you want to produce an article on the best work boots in the country. The content UX is a real thing, and I actually showed my client, hey, look, this article we created pretty half-assed.
Yeah,
it's generating 4K of revenue. Now their whole perspective on long-form content and content depth over content length is such an important. Like, why does this? Why this content wins? Well, search intent. Let's throw out the SEO nerdy terms. But the audience is lazy, so they just want to know the best products without clicking through 30 pages of pagination.
Yeah, and
I trust
think
us to deliver.
Yeah, and I think the other side of that as well, with the intent, is that part of a content strategy is knowing when something needs to be an FAQ that's literally 2 sentences long and immediately answers the question, and when it is a 1,000-word article, because not everything is right for a 1,000-word article. Like if you answer the thing, if you can answer it in a paragraph, answer it in a paragraph. Like
exactly.
That is what the customer wants.
How to spell this word in English?
Yeah.
Or in Australian English. Like that doesn't need to be. It's not going to be 1,000 words. Yeah, 100%. Are you doing a lot in terms of Hotjar, like the user experience side of SEO, and lowering bounce rates? Do you do much? I think you mentioned conversion optimization.
Yeah, so I do have a history in conversion optimization. It's not something that I'm working on specifically with any of my clients at the moment. And so I haven't really been in the world of heat maps or anything like that recently. A lot of times because the clients that I'm working with are working with another agency to do that. And my perspective is I'll let them do their thing and walk along with them in their experiments and their hypotheses, and sanity check the results, because the example that I always give to clients is if you have a product detail page, and one of the most successful experiments that you've had from a conversion rate perspective is replacing everything on the page with an explainer video, that is going to tank your visibility. So you may have a much better conversion rate, but you're going to have much fewer people coming to that page in the first place. So I take the extreme examples sometimes when explaining things like this, because nothing on a website can be done in a silo anymore. No,
that's right. That's right. It's a very good answer. I only really got one more question for you, and I'm out of questions. That's, again, preparation. I'm your champion. All right, preparation, champion. And you've answered things very specific, and I'm just like, well, I don't know where to go with that. That's just that's a perfect response to my very poorly prepared question. What are you working on with it? Obviously, you don't have to get into too much detail. What's some of the things you're finding in your SEO day-to-day? What are some takeaways for me and for whoever's willing to listen, mainly for me, because I don't know how many people would listen. So it can benefit me, might as well, right? What are you finding in terms of your day-to-day wins? So where do you think overall your some of the things you're working on seem to be generically bringing you success across the board, not just industry specific? Do you really find the success or things that you apply as more industry specific generally than not?
Yeah, so one of the things that I've been doing quite widely across a number of clients, because I do have a content background, and so I understand kind of content strategy and kind of UX and looking across all of that. And I did it while I was enterprise at Optus as well, is kind of rolling back blogs and taking that content and putting it somewhere that it's actually relevant to the user journey, rather than just buried in the blog that's linked in the footer and no one ever goes to, that's like the graveyard of content. So actually pulling that out, updating it, making it useful again, making it.
Sorry for the technical difficulty, folks. We're back. So, yeah, you were discussing about the content graveyard, which is blog pagination.
Yeah. So I've actually been having, like I said, I've been having quite a bit of success pulling stuff out of the graveyard that is the blog, that never gets any love after the first week, that no one amplifies, that everyone just does because SEO. So like I said, at Optus, we when I was there, and the content that I pulled out of the blog and actually published underneath the product folder, that when content was a part of the journey, that increased conversion rates by about, not conversion rates, revenue by about 24%. And I've done similar things with existing clients in terms of consolidating their blog articles so that they don't have, 5 duplicate articles that are vaguely similar things, but are trying to target slightly different keywords. And I think generally.
And when you're consolidating, how do you? Sorry to cut you off. When you're consolidating, how do you determine which one is the one that the other 4 get consolidated into? Do you base it upon age, links, existing performance?
Yeah, essentially all of the above, right? I'll take a look at traffic in the last 12 months, anyone that has existing rankings, what kind of visibility they have. Like it's a combination of all of the things. But consolidating that, and I think just generally looking to entities and entity salience and topics rather than looking at specific keywords. Because I don't know what you found, but I found that particularly in kind of the last helpful content updates, Google seems to really be actively targeting anything that is vaguely duplicate content. So location pages, like anything like that, where it's like inches away from being the same content. Yeah. Because I think, and I think something that a lot of people forget, that sometimes I have to remind people, is that every page that Google crawls costs them money. And yes, they are $1 billion company, but they are crawling billions of pages. So it is still probably a relatively decent cost to crawl the internet on a relatively regular basis. So I think, honestly, that's probably the next frontier of SEO, right? Is your content actually getting not just crawled, but indexed. So being ruthless with anything duplicate and really honing in on intent and what makes sense for the customer. So I think there are going to be a lot of conversations around CX and UX for companies in the near future.
And I agree. I mean, I've done experiments where all I've done, Amanda, was just update the date of the article, republished, and watching it move 2 positions up. That's all I did.
Yeah.
Because Google wants the latest and the greatest. And a lot of content, especially that's not evergreen focused, needs to be regularly updated and consolidated. When you discuss putting the content in the user journey,
Mhm.
how do you go about, what's the sort of top level down that you do in terms of getting that action? Do you include relevant blogs in the structure of the content? Do you optimize with internal linking? For someone that doesn't really know what that means, how would you
Yeah.
explain it in one sentence?
So I bringing it back to bite me. Basically, I remind people that your website isn't. There isn't one way to get to your website. So someone who lands on a product page may not actually be going there with commercial intent, and you have a good conversion rate for e-commerce. Let's be really aggressive and say a good conversion rate for e-commerce is 5-6%. You still have 95% of the people on your website that are searching for some other type of information, and you don't want to lose that brand perception by not, to at least some degree, catering to what they're looking for.
And you'll find that it's hard, while I agree with you immensely, and
Yeah.
if you watched anything that I've been talking about recently, so important to think about. It's the long game, right? That we're
Yeah.
not salespeople, we're marketers, right?
Yeah.
We want to build brands, and that's the long game. It's hard. It sounds great practically, and I'm on board with you. Then you got to actually get it convincing the boardroom about the fact that this is going to cost money in the short term without any return on investment immediately. But if you don't build your brand, then you're just totally wasting your time.
Yeah, that's where I'll do things like proof of concepts, where I'll write, I'll have 1 or 2 product detail pages, and I'll do the internal linking, and if nothing else, you'll show, hey, this doesn't negatively affect our conversion rate. And it takes our developers 5 minutes to implement this module on the product detail pages. You want to make it as low stakes as you can, essentially.
Yeah. Well, I think that SEOs should be moving and have much more, whether you like it or you don't, you need to be across your user journey and the entire experience. I mean, it's not just, you just have to be, I think, just because that's what it's all about, the experience. It's all about the story, and it's all about the experience, and it's all about the convenience. And I think if you fail on one of those 3, and a brand can make up for the gap that you've just dropped, or the ball that you just dropped, then they're going to find it elsewhere.
Yeah.
People are lazy, they're time poor, they want an answer, they want it quickly, they're looking for something, and they want to find it quickly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think I always break it down into those 3: the story, the experience, and the convenience, and why they are so essential to build brands. So maybe it's another talk. But Amanda, I don't want to take up too much of your time, and I really want to thank you deeply for sharing your thoughts with me, putting up with my horrible podcast hosting abilities. Don't be cruel.
Never. No, I appreciate it. It's been lovely chatting.
And hopefully we can do it again. Did you have any other, where do people find you? And if they want to connect with you on LinkedIn or whatever, where are you digitally based? And can people get in touch if they want to?
Sure. Well, I've come back from a 10-year hiatus on Twitter. You can find me at Amanda E.C. King. And then I'm Amanda King on LinkedIn, but there are a lot of us. So my business is called Flock, FLOQ.
I noticed
birds
that.
of a feather. Yeah, birds of a feather flock together, but spelled funky because it's digital.
Yeah. No, I love it. That's awesome.
So you can catch me there as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Amanda, and kudos to James for recommending to speak with you because it's been lovely.
Yeah.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you again.